This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Becca Pearce, who is the author of You Don't Have to Achieve to Be Loved. Spent much of her career as a corporate warrior, leading teams at CareFirst, BlueCross, BlueShield, and Kaiser Permanente before being appointed CEO of Maryland's Health Benefit Exchange. After a very public separation from the exchange, Becca was diagnosed with a brain tumor, triggering a life-altering health battle that forced her to redefine success. Today, as an inspirational speaker, growth strategist, and personal executive coach, she sparks transformation in organizations and empowers professionals to lead with authenticity and purpose. She shares her journey as a living proof that no matter how many times you've been chewed up and spit out by life, you can rise stronger and live fully. When she's not on stage, she can be found on her boat, surrounded by family, friends, and her beloved pet bull mix, Nia. So, Becca, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's just start with a little context and tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of a little bit about your educational background and how you got into this crazy world of healthcare.
Sure. So I'm actually in Towson, Maryland right now, which is right outside of Baltimore. Born and raised about 3 miles from here. And in Baltimore, people live here by default. So after high school, I went to Washington University in St. Louis. And while I was there, decided that I wasn't going to live directly back in Baltimore. So I moved to Florida for 2 years and realized that I was flying home every month or so because one of my brothers was getting married, one of them was having a kid, my entire family was here, and I just thought to myself, what am I doing, right? I just need to go back to Baltimore. So I moved back to Baltimore and ended up taking many different jobs. I was in marketing for a long time as well, and then I went back to school and got my MBA. And at that time, I was thinking to myself, I need to do something different with this. And so I actually jumped into the bubble, the internet bubble, had several jobs in internet companies that failed because they didn't get funding. And it was so funny because I was getting married and I needed like my last job, you know, was collecting unemployment. And at that time, there was a newspaper. And to collect unemployment, you had to apply for 2 jobs a week. And so I went through and I circled this job for CareFirst, BlueCross, BlueShield, and I went and interviewed, and they spent the entire time talking me out of the job. And
Okay.
so I said to my mom, I was like, I just can't take this job. They spent the entire time talking me out of it. And she said, Rebecca, you may not go into a marriage without a job. And so so I started my career at CareFirst, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and didn't leave healthcare for 20 years later.
Oh, wow. Wow. And then you became the CEO of the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange. And that was part of the Affordable Care Act, right? During the time,
Yes.
as most people know it as Obamacare. So tell us a little bit about was that exciting? Was it something that you really believed in? Was it something someone twisted your arm to do? Tell us how you got into that role.
So when I first started looking for a job, I was when I worked for Kaiser Permanente, I was still living in Baltimore, but I had one team in Northern California and one team in Southern California. And so I spent much of my life on the road. And I thought to myself, well, I need to look for a job that's closer to Baltimore where I'm going to be home. And so I was talking to a friend of mine who knew about this job, and it just seemed like such a perfect fit. And I went into this interview with this group of policy people, and I said, you know what, you have a lot of policy people in this room. You need somebody who knows how to get something done and who understands the other side of the world, who understands insurance. And so I said to my husband afterwards, he said, how did it go? And I said, well, I made one point and I made it a lot. And if that's not what they're looking for, then this is not the job for me. And so I walked into that job naively, thinking well, yeah, we can get this done. Of course we can get this done. And I could not have believed more in what we were doing. I could not have tried harder to make what we were trying to do work. There were a lot of things going against me, but I spent 2 years. I did not go to my daughter's school for 2 years. I came home late. I came home at 10:30 on a regular basis. Like I barely saw my family for 2 years because I just was trying so hard to make it a reality.
Yeah, and it's and you wrote this book that we talked about in the bio. I'm just holding it up here for those who are looking at this on the video. And you talk about in this book how, you became one of those obsessive workaholic type of people, spending as you just said, time away from family and going in early in the morning and working late at night and just kind of burning out, right?
Yeah, completely. And I
Yeah.
think the interesting thing that's not in the book is that what I see with a lot of people that I coach is when you are in the trenches so deep in something, there's this belief that maybe your family doesn't understand what you're going through. And so it's hard to have that conversation. It's hard to bring home the stress and the angst and the anguish and the fear, all of those things that, oh my gosh, I may fail at this. And all of those things are very difficult to bring home. And so you tend to overdo it even more into your job.
And on the back side of it now, do you think it was the job just required that because it was new and different and you had to create this system, or is it just that you put undue pressure on yourself that made it harder than it needed to be as far as time commitment?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think that we were given regulations on a regular basis. Regulations changed or they hadn't been out yet. I mean, we were really up against some very difficult things in the state of Maryland. We were merging three different organizations, three different state agencies, and when I first started, I didn't have a desk. I didn't have an employee. It was one person, and in 2 years, I grew it to 90 people with a new place to stay. You know, all the things that you have to do when you're building a company at the same time that you're trying to implement a $300 million IT change.
So now that you've spent all this unbelievable time and effort into this exchange, building it, growing it, you'd think that maybe all your hard work paid off, but then you get this crazy phone call on December 6th, 2013. So tell us, what was the phone call and where did it come from?
So that phone call was the chief of staff of the governor of the state of Maryland. On October 1st was when the exchange went live, and it didn't turn on the way it was supposed to. It did turn on, just not as well as it should have, and so a lot of people couldn't get through, and it was seen as a complete failure. And so on December 6th, somebody has to, accountability and responsibility are in the same place. I was the CEO of that organization. Um, I was the only non-elected official that had anything to do with the exchange. And so I was suggested strongly that I resign.
And so you say in the book too that the exchange had become your identity, that
Yeah.
you put so much time and effort into it that I once interviewed a person on this podcast in a previous episode, and one of the things that he said as advice was never pick an identity that someone can take away from you, as it can disappear in a minute, and then what do you do? So it sounds that like that's exactly what happened to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't realize at the time actually what was happening, but I very much believed in me being Obamacare in the state of Maryland. And like I said, I could not have believed more in what we're doing. I drank that Kool-Aid, hook, line, and sinker. I thought we were going to bring health insurance and safety and peace of mind to people who have never had the chance to have health care before. I still believe that. And it just became everything that I focused on. It really became my identity.
And then in the book, you also describe that even at that dark time, you had three significant job offers pretty quickly within 3 weeks after that, uh,
Yeah.
but you just couldn't bring yourself to jump on board of one of those. What were you just grieving the loss of the identity, so to speak, so much that you just couldn't think past it?
I think what I realized is that when I resigned, I was bone exhausted. I mean, I could have probably slept for a month. In fact, my brother asked me one time, what are you going to do when this is over? And I said, I'll probably sleep for a month because I was only sleeping 3 or 4 hours a day, or a night. I think I was so exhausted, and I think that I realized. So one of those job offers was in California, one of them was in Arizona, and another one was in Washington, D.C. And you would think that Washington, D.C. and Baltimore aren't that far apart, but I live on the north side of Baltimore, and so the fastest I could possibly get to DC was an hour and 45-minute commute each way. And so I wasn't moving my family to any of the other states, and I couldn't fathom. There was a piece of me that understood, like, you have given 2 years for this, and for what?
Mhm.
Why did you walk away from your family for 2 years? You can't do that again.
And you even state in the book a story about after you'd been fired or let go or whatever the heck you want to call it, um, that your husband called you at 10 o'clock at night and you were still at the office. And he said, they let you go, so come home, even
Yeah.
though you had a tough time letting it go.
Yeah, I mean, especially that day, there were so many things that I felt like I needed to wrap up that night. So I was walking around the office trying to put everything together. I wanted it to wrap in a bow because the most important thing was that I didn't want people to think that I gave up. That wasn't who I was. I didn't want them to think that I gave up on what we were trying to do.
So just when everything couldn't get much worse, probably in your mind, then you had this health issue and you had an MRI of your brain. So tell us what happened there and how that piled on to what was already.
Yeah, so 14, 16 months. So it was March of 2000. I lost my job in December of 2013. And in March of 2015, I couldn't hear out of my left ear. And so, the joke with my daughter was, you can't talk into mommy's good ear. You have to talk, or into mommy's bad ear. You have to talk into mommy's good ear. And a friend of mine said to me, single-sided deafness isn't normal, right? Like, you really should get that checked out. I mean, I had been ignoring this for 2 to 3 years. I just assumed I'm 43. My dad went deaf early. Like, I just was losing my hearing, and this is normal aging. And so I went in for a hearing exam and essentially walked out finding out that I had a brain tumor the size of a ping pong ball and I needed surgery imminently. And so, imminently is 5 weeks in this scenario because it was so big that it was growing into my brainstem. Because I had ignored it for as long as I had ignored it, everybody listening to this is the PSA. Don't ignore your body. Go to the doctor. Had I gone to the doctor when I first started to lose my hearing, it wouldn't have been an emergency. I wouldn't be deaf in my left ear potentially. I wouldn't be mostly blind in my left eye. My face wouldn't be paralyzed. Like, the implications and the impacts of me waiting were so big that it completely changed the trajectory of my future. And so I went in for surgery on May 28th. Thank God it was benign and operable. Still a really big deal. And so what happened was, at that time, I had landed on my feet at the University of Maryland Medical Systems, and I was a vice president within the hospital system and working. After the exchange, I had just gotten right back on that same trail, right back on that same thing. We're going to work hard. We're going to, let's get back to the CEO world, right? There's just this constant push for future. Let's just keep moving. And that brain tumor was just a smack in the face, right? Like, no pun intended, because my face was paralyzed, but it was just, nope, time out. This is not your life. This is not who you're supposed to be. And it's time to change.
I can only imagine. And then you also said that your way of dealing with all this at this time with your job and this brain tumor, whatever, was you were, for the PSA part of this, you were very physically fit because you were a runner. You ran
Mhm.
all the time. And so that was your way to just escape some of these realities that were there by running.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about that regularly, that bad things happen to good people, right? There's nothing I could have done about it. It seems unfair because why is it that I spend so much time eating healthy and running and being a healthy person when here I am in this situation?
Yeah, that's crazy. So once you were taken down, so to speak, and had to start over with all looking at your life and your job and your health and all things at once, you kind of came to the conclusion, you said that, you had built up this idea uh, that your self-worth depended on accomplishments. And where did that come from? Where was that just something that was instilled in you forever that you had to accomplish something to be appreciated or feel like you were important?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because with the people that I coach, this is a very common belief as well. And for overachievers, for those of you who are listening who are overachievers, you probably relate to this in some way, that there is some belief that achievement equals love in some way. And I think I didn't even realize it until the neighborhood food train showed up after surgery. And people showed up to bring food to my door, which seems like normal humanity for most people. Like, of course that happens. But for me, I was flabbergasted. I just couldn't understand why it was that people were showing up and doing things that were nice for me. Like, I hadn't achieved anything for them. And some of them I didn't even know. Like, why is this happening? And it was that, like, it was truly mind blowing for me. And so it was that recognition that I was like, oh, apparently I believe that you have to achieve to be loved. And this is why I keep pushing for a new title or a new job or, just constantly pushing for it to run faster or whatever for that external achievement. And I think in my own scenario, it came from my upbringing. My mother, I even write this in the book. My mother never said I'm proud of you. And for 43 years, I chased that one single statement, one single, I'm proud of you. And that put me down this path of, well, now I'm going to prove that she should be proud of me, right? And chasing that over and over and over. So I think that, and for the people that I coach too, I think it consistently comes from something along that path.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you also state too that I thought this was interesting where you said time, not titles, is really the measure of success. So what you do with your time, how much time you have, it's not what you accomplish with the initials at the end of your name.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one realization I mean, I had many, but one of the big ones was this is all a lie. Everything that we've been told that we're chasing, all of this title and this money and at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is time with your family. Because I can guarantee you that when you get a diagnosis like this, the number one thing you're going to think is, oh my God, I wish I had more time with my family.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that is just, I'm going to cry thinking about it right now.
Well, and it's crazy when you think about it because I think that statement we've heard a million times. We've heard so many people say that, but yet to believe it is a whole different thing. And I can, there's so many people that I know and I've talked to on this program and I've read in books and I've seen give speeches that basically say, time is everything, yet we don't take the time we should with things. And maybe we're learning that from the young, for the newer generations coming aboard.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that there definitely is a perspective of, so I have this theory that, it's generational, right? So whatever generation you're raised by comes with their own limitations, their own beliefs. And I'm a Gen Xer, and so I believe that the women, especially in the Gen X population, we were sold you can have it all. But if you do it all, if you do want to have it all, oh, you've got to be like running 100 miles a minute at all times to make it happen. We were the ones who tried to achieve all of those things that we were told. Yes, you can have it all. Yes, you can be a CEO. And yes, you can raise a family. And yes, it all works together. And so I believe that we're all sold this societal belief that title and money matters when really until you until you recognize it for yourself. And I think it's one of those things, like you said, we all hear it, but until you actually are experiencing it, it's a very difficult thing to recognize.
And I also think too, you talk about in the book the fear of money too, of not only titles and prestige and status and all that, but there's also the baby boomers and maybe the Gen Xers too. We're fearful of the money, and so it's like, what are we going to do? How we're not make? It's almost like you can never make enough money, and so that's a concern as well.
That is very true. And, I like to say that the fear of money is a dream killer because what ends up happening for a lot of people is I need to make this amount of money that I've made so far, right? So a lot of people that I work with and the clients that come to me are the clients who have been super successful in their career. They have done everything that they're supposed to do. They have said yes to all of the options that were put in front of them. And they've taken care of their kids, they've taken care of their dog, they've taken care of their parents, they've done all of these things, and they're slowly waking up and saying, wait a minute, I'm not happy. But what ends up happening is the next thing is, but I'm stuck because I have to make the money that I'm making right now. And so I will tell you that having worked with, many people through this process, that is also a really easy excuse to hide behind when you're scared of making a change. So there is a legit fear out there for people about whether or not they have enough money to continue. And I will tell you that when we sit down and look at the numbers, I have never once had one person who couldn't make a change. They were so tied to their money that they couldn't make a change. So once we get through that, then we try to figure out why they're still stuck. And it's usually because that was what they were hiding behind. They're too afraid to make a deeper change, and it's easy to hide behind needing the money.
So after this personal journey and discovery that you had to go through, and now you're in the coaching business to help others see these things that we just talked about as well, you talk about the four phases of change. So why don't you go over that a little bit, just kind of give us a summary of what those are and how that helped you get through your journey and how you coach others to do it as well.
Sure. So what I have found is, and these are the four phases that I went through. They are the four phases that everybody goes through, no matter how big of a change you're making, whether you're just deciding to ride a bike to work instead of driving to work or changing jobs, anything, like from the littlest change to the biggest change. Everybody starts in this place of called unfortunate awareness. You're in this space where you are realizing that something's not quite right. And you can't unsee the fact that this is wrong. As soon as you start to notice the thing that's not working for you, you can't unsee it, which is why I call it unfortunate awareness. To move out of that phase, you really need to kind of take a look at yourself and say, what are the beliefs that I have that are keeping me stuck here? Then you move on to this phase called mourning the past. This is where you kind of look back and you go, okay, you know what? But I liked that person. I liked that CEO. She served me for 43 years. She was really amazing. I liked her. Like, I don't want to lose that. Or, I kind of liked, I coaching somebody who's getting divorced, and her mourning is, but I liked being married. She didn't like her ex-husband anymore, but she liked being married, right? So it's really, there are pieces that you need um, to understand what it is that's kind of keeping you mourning that past. The third phase is one foot in, one foot out. And this is where the social and emotional ties come in. If you're going to be asking the question, what's my family going to say? Who are my friends going to be? You're in this one foot out, one foot in, one foot out phase where you part of you knows that you want to be moving to this new person or this new job or this new anything, but you're not really sure what people are going to say. Let's go back to the silly example of riding your bike to work. What's somebody going to say when you show up with helmet hair, right? Like that type of thing. You're really in that phase of one foot in, one foot out. And it's not until you really have this conversation, and for a lot of people, it's a going back to this financial conversation of, can I become this new person? Can I let go of this fear of money? Can I let go of the $150,000 a year I make, or insert whatever that number is, and move on to be the person that I want to be? Can I change careers? Can I shift 180 degrees? It's not until you get through that that you get to this point that you're clearly me. So it's, the four phases again: unfortunate awareness, mourning the past, one foot in, one foot out, and then clearly me.
Yeah, thanks for summarizing that. You also talk about too that to kind of get through these stages and get to where you're a happier person, that you need to harness allies, and you call the allies like optimism and fear to kind
Mm.
of fuel that reinvention. So I think we can all understand optimism, but anger might need, or fear, I mean, might need a little more explanation.
Yeah, so fear is interesting because it ultimately becomes when you have fear, it shows what you actually want. And underneath fear is usually just that, what am I trying to say? Underneath fear is, again, a want, and it's a voice that normally people don't. It's the inner voice that says, well, what if I could do this? But then there's the head voice that says, well, nobody would ever listen to you about that, right? And the head voice pushes you down, and that's your brain creating that fear for you to stay where you are. So if you give voice to the fear, it actually helps push you forward and recognize what it is that you actually want in life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Most people come to coaches because they want to improve their leadership or improve their communication, so on. But I think a lot of your people come to you that you end up coaching because they realize something is off in their life or their career. So, in reading this and how you explained it, I couldn't help but think, are you a coach or are you a psychologist?
I'm definitely not a psychologist, but I will tell you that many of my coachees refer to me as their work therapist. And I always make a joke about coaching that when I first opened my coaching firm in 2017, I worked for corporate America. Like I had contracts and they would send me, people to coach. And the dirty little secret about coaching executives is, if they come to you for coaching, they're probably going to leave their job, right? Because they're unhappy, right? And so that's sort of the dirty little secret. And so it just has shifted to this point where I now coach successful people who are at that point and come to me individually and say, I'm done.
And what is the hardest thing I know is a general question, but what's the hardest thing that those people have to see or agree to or look at straight in the face that makes them change what's going on?
I think it is. First of all, they have to be willing to look in the mirror, right? They have to be willing. And it is really this core belief, which what my core belief was you don't have to achieve to be, or you have to achieve to be loved, which is the title of the book. You don't have to achieve to be loved. It is that reckoning with whatever that core belief is for you. For some people, it's slightly different. But until you recognize that that is the thing that has driven you your entire career, that's the thing that has gotten you to where you are now, until you change that, you're not going to move forward.
So it's almost, is it part of this also dealing with trying to get people not to worry so much about what other people think of them? Is that a component of it?
Yeah, definitely a component. I think that people who are super successful and I'm going to continue to use the word overachiever, right? I think there is a component of external validation for sure that I think is really important to address.
Yeah. In the book, at the end of each chapter, you have a journal reflections, and so obviously you believe in journaling. So tell us how you use that with yourself and your clients to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am not an everyday journaler. I journal for myself when I'm in a strategic thinking mode for my business or feeling like something is off for me. And what I do is I actually create coaching questions to related to what I'm feeling. So most recently, I was thinking about, okay, what are we going to do in 2026? And I was feeling really anxious about 2026 because I have a lot of groups that I run, and my groups all end in December. And how am I going to build my groups for January? That type of thing. And so I was feeling a different kind of anxiety than I have in the past. So I really created questions for myself around what's going on for me. Like, what is my biggest fear? What is my real fear? Like, your brain can tell you one thing, but really, what's really the fear? So I use that. And I think it's really powerful for people, especially in the book. What I've heard is people read the book It's a very fast read to go through. And then a lot of people pick and choose the chapters that speak to them and do the journaling there to help them move forward. So I think it's a really powerful tool.
You think of too, as a ex-CEO myself, and you've been a CEO, it's hard to let go of some of those things that are part of being a CEO. So, giving yourself different tasks and feeling valued for that task or those inputs is different than running a company and calling the shots and managing teams.
For sure. I say all the time that the relationship you have with yourself when are a small business owner is completely different than the relationship you have when you're in corporate America. Whether you were the CEO or the vice president or any person in that, when you own your own business, it's a totally different relationship. I would have fired myself like 3 times in the first 6 months of my business because how could it be that it took this long to do a strategic plan? If I had somebody working on a strategic plan, I would be like, okay, well, let's review it. Let's do it. And for me, it was just right. So this relationship with yourself is really, for me, a much more emotional one, really getting into those emotions.
And you talk about it in the book too. Vulnerability is a piece of this. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. And we've heard that word a lot lately in leadership circles and whatever, but it's significant. You have to be vulnerable, and that's not easy for people that have been at the top to look at and accept.
Yeah. In fact, this is my answer to your last question. But when I think about vulnerability, it is for me, it showed up very physically. There was no way, when I was working at the exchange, I would cry my entire way to work. But then I would get out of the car, put my makeup on, and walk in like nothing was wrong because I believed that this invincibility was how we were going to run the business and how we were going to get it to where we were supposed to be. But what I realized is that when you have no vulnerability and you're have high strength, right? Here I am thinking that I'm working through all of this. Like this is the classic sort of CEO who's showing up and just saying, you can't see any chinks in my armor because I'm really strong. You're uninspiring as a leader. People can't stand behind you because they don't understand you, they don't feel you. But if you introduce just a little bit of vulnerability, and to be very clear, this is as Brene Brown says, this is not using vulnerability to make people feel bad for you. This is like, you know what, I actually don't know the answer to that. I would love for you to give me some feedback. That type of vulnerability, I don't have all of the answers at every single moment. I don't know everything. That actually makes you trustworthy. It makes you authentic. It makes you creative. People see you completely differently if you just add that one piece of, I don't know all of the answers as a leader. That's a beautiful thing that you can be doing for yourself.
It's so true. And in my experience, I can think of specific situations where I felt maybe embarrassed or people are going to judge me or whatever when I was vulnerable. Yet they would come back and say, that's when I connected with you the most. That's
Yeah.
when you showed your emotion, you showed your vulnerability, you showed things that wanted me to work with you even more and work even harder. And again, it's something, and as you mentioned, Brene Brown, she's made that very popular and very everyone's heard it. And again, so it's there, but it's not something that everyone feels comfortable doing. It's just something that we seem to put up a wall against a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. So you also talk about the success in life. There's a chapter in there like helping to define success,
Mm.
and you make a couple statements. One is that time is all that matters. We already talked about that. And that success isn't about getting rich, which we talked about the money part of it too. So here again, there's two things that we probably know to be true, but they're hard to embrace and they're hard to accept.
I think the most interesting thing when I was doing the research for that chapter specifically about living, and the chapter is about living somebody else's definition of success, because when's the last time that you sat down and wrote your definition of success? And so, for most people, that's never. I've never actually defined it. Your definition of success is handed to you. It's handed to you from your family. It's handed to you from society. It's handed to you from social media, right? It's handed to you from your faith. There are many ways that it's handed to you, and until you actually stop and take a look and see what your own definition of success is, it's very difficult for you to feel fulfilled, especially for the overachiever. And so the research that I did was about the American dream. And there was a study done just recently in the 2020s and later about whether or not the Americans think that they are living the American dream. And so what it is that when they were individually questioned, individuals say happiness is the most important thing. But what they think other people think they think it is, right? So if you define it for yourself, it's happiness. But we as individuals also think that everybody else thinks it should be success and money and all of the things that we've always tied it to. So we're using an external belief to define for ourselves that we need money and title, when really what we want is happiness. And if we take this time to actually look at it and see what we want, that's what we would want.
So it's so interesting. I was in a group with a bunch of CEOs one time at this meeting, and there was a break, and this one of the CEOs in the group went out and got on his phone. He came back and he was so excited, and he said, "My daughter just got a full ride scholarship to a Division I school to play soccer, and I'm so excited." And we're all, "Oh, congratulations, it's so great and everything." And then he just looked, and then he actually started crying. And we looked at him and like, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, that's so amazing, but I haven't seen her play a match in 4 years." And it was just one of those things like, oh my gosh, when we talk about time and what's the definition of a success and whatever, I think he missed it. I think he missed it.
Yeah, that just brought tears to my eyes thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing I think was interesting in the book is you talk about how you are a self-proclaimed introvert, and that but in your roles you kind of felt you had to be an extrovert at times and come out and be something different. Do you think that's part of the tug and pull that made you feel like you just weren't finding your place?
Yeah, I think that, and this I think is true for a lot of people. So first and foremost, I think is interesting is that the majority of CEOs, if you study CEOs across any Fortune 500 all the way down to any company, the majority of them are introverts. And it makes it difficult. I think for many introverts, you can turn it on, right? It's not like you can't turn it on. It's you can turn it on, but it becomes exhausting at the end of the day. So for me at the exchange, I was, speaking to legislators on a regular basis. I was going to the state house. I was doing all of these things in the state of Maryland. And like I said earlier, those days were very long. So my exhaustion level was higher at the end of the day because I had to turn it on for so long. And I do think that that led to some of the burnout.
I think that's an interesting observation. I again, looking at myself for comparison, I would class myself as being a little bit more on the introvert side than the extrovert side. And people think that, oh, leaders of companies and are mostly extroverts. But I would agree with you. I don't think that's really true. I think if you're too much of an extrovert and too loud and too, front and center all the time, maybe that's a deterrent for people to hire you as a CEO. But yet there are times when you have to dig down and come out a little bit different than your normal go-to or what you'd be most comfortable doing. But I think good leaders know how to do that and can do that effectively.
Yeah.
So another thing that in the book that I thought was true, because I've heard it so many times with other guests on this program as well, is the need for humans of belonging.
Mm.
So whatever that is, however you define that, we just feel like we need to be part of something. If you're an introvert or somebody who, maybe isn't, at happy hour every night, you still need that belonging in some way to certain groups, to certain, to your family, to certain types of people. We're not, we're not hermits. So we weren't made to be hermits.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I was just listening to a different podcast this week, and what they were talking about is the fact that going back to this introverts, tying these two things together, introverts think that being around people is going to be awful. Introverts think that going to a happy hour or, going to a networking event is going to be horrible. But the outcome of it is that they're actually happier on the back end if you actually study them. And so it's really interesting that in this post-pandemic world where people are still looking for the hybrid solution, people still want to be at home, working from home on a regular basis. But by and large, so there was a study done in 2023, and 73% of people wanted in-person meetings, even though like 90% wanted to work hybrid or at home. So people want both. So I think it's really interesting that finding this balance for yourself about what is, especially in corporate America, what is the right solution for you and your team in terms of how much time you have in front of them.
There's another part of the book that was hard to read, so I can only imagine it was hard to write. So tell us about how you had such good friends, I believe, Mark and Alice,
Mm.
and during the time that you were doing this crazy job and going through this health stuff and whatever, and then now later in life, you're not as close to them. So tell us the story and why do you think that is?
Yeah, funny story. I just heard from Mark yesterday that Alice broke her leg last week. So that is, and had that happened 10 years ago, we would have been the first phone call. So it's this story of that many people go through with relationships and 15, 20, my daughter's 18. So 20 years ago, we were as close as families can be. I used to say that we were as close as, as close as you can be without being family. And post surgery, he had just sold his business, so he was in the in the mess of trying to sell his business in those last horrible 6 months of contracts and stuff like that. And I was going through recovering from surgery, and it was just this space where both of us started to grow in different directions. And I began to realize that I can't hang out with people. I'm deaf in my left ear. I can't hear conversations. I'm very uncomfortable being in the setting that I was in before because I can't be the person that I used to be. And they were moving down this path of who are we becoming? We're becoming something different. And so we just began to grow apart. And it was gut wrenching. I mean, I spent a good year of therapy working through that because I felt like an eighth grader. I felt like for especially for women listening, you might get this, right? I didn't want to go to the party, but I didn't not want to get invited to the party. And so it
Yeah.
was a very difficult, and it wasn't until I came out, that was that for me, that was that 1 foot in, 1 foot out phase. This is where I was questioning, who are my friends going to be? What are they going to say about me if I don't do the things that I used to do anymore? And so it was that reckoning with myself to say, you know what, I'm going to find my new friends. Like I love them and I'm going to let them do what they want to do. I can't be on their boat anymore because my boat's over here. And so I'm going to find myself and find my new friends.
And that goes into one of your four phases too, where it's the fear or I guess fear of letting go of something. It's the way it's always been, and that's what I thought I was. And so to let that go, that must be really hard. And uh, yeah, I thought it was very brave of you to put that in the book. Because it's a personal story, but I think we've all experienced some level of that, and it's hard. My question is, have Mark and Alice read it and what do they think about it?
They have, and I asked them whether or not they wanted me to change their names, and they said, "This is our truth. This is our story, and we love you and we support you." And so no, they have read it and totally support me.
And you think of friends too, where for whatever reasons you drift apart and you do different things. But sometimes you come back after long periods of time without being around them, and it's the same old, it's like you just picked up where you left off. So you may not have it as much, you may not have it as much as you wanted, but when you do get together, it's still there.
Yeah, right.
I think it's really interesting when I don't know if you felt this, but one of my big shocks, I think, when I became an ex-CEO or when I retired. I had, really good friends in the company.
Mm,
They were employees, they were colleagues, they were peers, but they were friends too. And so I felt I was like the most prepared person ever to retire. I gave a notice that I was going to do it 2 years ahead of time. We worked all
wow.
the way through the succession planning and wanted to make sure we had the right person, and we did all the things. But what I didn't realize was that the day I retired, I lost contact with a lot of those people that I thought were friends, and it was hard. It was kind of like, oh my gosh, I thought we'd still, but again, if you're not in meeting rooms with them, if you don't see them in the office, if you don't see them at conferences or meetings, it's not like we had a relationship before where I picked up the phone and talked all the time. So it would
Mm.
make sense that that would go away, but that was a hard adjustment for me. So it resonated with me about talking about your friends because I kind of went through that too, where all of a sudden people that I thought were, you know, my besties, all of a sudden kind of disappeared. But yet when I see them now occasionally, there's still that good feeling, and we pick up where we left off. It's just not what I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I think anybody, and I do coach a lot of people selling their business and going into retirement too. And I think that is a fear, right? Yeah, these are the people that I connect with on a regular basis. And I've said to my husband more than once, like, how many times do I need to learn that some people are just work friends? Right? How many, and so that is a very painful thing to recognize. And I think that's why it was important for people to also understand that you will find your new people. It may be, you may actually need to put a little bit of effort into it, but you will find your new group of friends.
Well, and I think too, a great leadership skill and a good CEO and a good leader in whatever realm that is are relationship builders. So you build relationships. It's not just, somebody that you ask to do something for you at work. You build a relationship with that person. So when that changes, that's an adjustment you just have to deal with, and sometimes
Hmm.
it takes you by surprise.
Yeah, for sure.
Another example of that was my wife and I, when I retired, we had kind of a place out here, which was more of a vacation and weekend getaway place. And then when I retired, we sold the house, in the suburb and then remodeled this one to be our forever home. And we loved it. It's beautiful and it's just so great. And we're out here. And after a little while, we're like, where are our people? You know? And so you're right. We had to work at it to kind of reach out and find our people. And we have, and we've got great friends out here now too. And we still have our old friends, but it's
Hmm.
different. So I think it sounds kind of basic, but I think it's very important to being who we are as humans.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Becca, in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you or what haven't we covered that you'd like to get into the program today?
I think you have covered every chapter of the book. Uh, you don't have to achieve to be loved, I think is the most important thing, right? And just knowing that is
Yeah.
valuable.
And if you haven't already said it at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
And I think I did jump the gun on that because I think it very much is that vulnerability piece that as a leader of any organization, or even if you're a vice president, if you're leading anybody, inserting a little bit of yourself goes unbelievably a long way. Like I wish I had some scientific, data to be able to say this is the percentage difference it's going to make in your future, but it is absolutely the number one way to change your trajectory, change the trajectory of your team, to get your team to stand behind you, to make them more productive, to increase your bottom line. All of those things just by showing up and admitting you don't know all the answers.
For sure. And your daughter, who you said is 18 now, she's
Mhm.
experienced all this crazy time when you were away so much, when you went through your health issue, when you recreated your career. What do you hope that she learns from all that and that she does in her adult life?
So last year when she was applying to college, she wrote an essay and it essentially said, "My mother is the strongest person I know." And that's because she chose to walk away from a career that didn't work for her to find the balance to spend the time with her family. And that is absolutely the best thing that I ever could have taught her.
Well, it sounds like she listened and you showed her the way. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Becca, this has been a real pleasure. I enjoyed reading the book and learning from you. And you're right, it is a good read. It's a quick read. The stories are great, and you were vulnerable and really bared yourself there and were brave. So that always makes a good book. So thanks for being on the program today. Definitely learned a lot, and your life has been an example of it doesn't always go the way you'd planned or hoped. But if you stick with it, you can still be a happy person and come out great on the other end.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, take care. It's great having you today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.